Right, okay.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It is Tuesday night and it is Liam Kennedy night, and it's a pre-recorded show tonight, so don't think we're being ignorant, and don't be surprised when you don't see any comments on the screen. It's because me and Liam aren't actually here, and it's actually Monday night, but we're here anyway. I'm working away this week, working away in London on Tuesday and Wednesday, so unfortunately I've had to pre-record it. However, we did put a question call out to you lot on Twitter, and you haven't let us down. Plenty of questions, but first of all, Liam, let's celebrate a great win at the weekend. 2-1 against Burnley, a 6-pointer against a team around us, and we won it in style in the second half.
Yeah, I would say so. I've seen some mixed responses to it on social media in the last day or so, and it's got me a bit bemused, to be honest. If I'm going to be totally honest with all of this, Steve, I think the way I'm viewing this season is, of course, Steve Bruce isn't the answer to all of our questions. Mike Ashley isn't the answer to all of our questions. Some of the players that we've got in this team and in this squad certainly aren't the answers to many questions, if any at all. But the sole goal has to be now is just to stay in the division, and getting that result on Sunday was such a massive thing to do, because Newcastle have been presented with opportunities before. Fulham have been presented with opportunities to put us into the bottom three. And it was actually Newcastle United who stood up and took advantage of an opportunity that came their way. And nobody expected them to. And I expected it to be an absolute torrent of positivity, because that's the way I feel about it. And that doesn't mean that I'm celebrating being 17th in the division. That doesn't mean I'm accepting mediocrity like Mike Ashley or whoever it may be, or like Steve Bruce or Alan Pardew or John Carver, whoever it may well have been down the line that people aren't happy with. But ultimately, I'm just happy that Newcastle won a game. I don't get why there's got to be a negative slant on everything. Newcastle won a game, and they won a game. People are like, well, it was only Alan St. Maximin. Well, he's our player till the summer at least, and that's what he's there for. He's a quality footballer. Enjoy him while he's here. Enjoy a win. We don't win very often. We haven't won all that often in the last 6 months. Why can't you let yourselves enjoy it a little bit? I felt positive about it. I don't want Newcastle United to get relegated. In no scenario in my head playing out does getting relegated ever come into the equation. I would rather Newcastle United continue as they are, but knowing there was a brighter future down the line, than go down to get a quicker one. I don't want to be out of the division. I don't want to leave the Premier League, because it's the wilderness outside of that. And you've seen that it can become a real graveyard. It isn't that hard a division to get out of, the Championship. It is overlooked slightly about how good it is and the strength and depth. That's shown by the fact that it might well be the 3 teams that got relegated last season that come straight back. Oh, I don't want Newcastle to be in that conversation at all. So let's just enjoy ourselves to be positive, enjoy a result that was a good result in a tough game. Going to Burnley in any given season is not an easy game. Yes, I know they've been rubbish. They've probably been the worst team Newcastle have played this season, largely, in terms of games. Maybe you could argue maybe Southampton in there as well. But there's been a few. But Newcastle should be able to enjoy that. It was, like I say, it was a win. And it took them 6 points clear of the bottom 3. I don't think take the aftermath of the Southampton game and take the Everton game out of the equation. I think Newcastle United fans have largely been stuck in the same on the same track, which has been, we've all felt like we're going to get relegated since January, probably.
Yeah.
The signs were there before that in December and November as well, when things were really poor, but they were just scraping results here and there. And the signs are going back even to last year as well. But look, it doesn't look like they're going to go down. My take on it is just using pure logic. Fulham are going to have, if Fulham even slightly better, have a slightly better end of the season than what they've had over the full season. They've picked up 26 points in 32 games. So if they do go a point per game in their last 6 games, they haven't got anywhere near a point a game. It's probably 0.8 or something. And someone out smarter than me out there will do the maths. But if they improve on that and pick up a point a game, it's only going to take them to 32. If they have a better, if they pick up 1.5 and pick up 9 points, it only takes them to 35.
Yeah.
So Newcastle United are almost there. And I think that's okay to be happy with that because of the landscape. We've got to live in the here and now. Ideally, I do not want Newcastle United fighting relegation. I don't want them celebrating finishing 17th or avoiding relegation by the skin of their teeth, which it's looking like it is. But it's okay in the moment. This is Newcastle United's reality. And it's okay to also be very happy that they are avoiding relegation and they do pick up a result that cements their place in 17th. It's a strange situation that we find ourselves in, but it's the reality. And one of the key indicators that I base my positivity at the moment on is that I know, as you do, Steve, and as other people do, that there is a possible brighter future on the horizon. With relegation, in my opinion, other people differ. In my opinion, relegation almost ends that in the short term. But staying up, it means it's got a chance. And that's all I want. As long as it's got a chance and it's bubbling away and fighting away, any kind of takeover, and Newcastle United is still a saleable asset as a Premier League club, then I think there is a reason to be positive. And that was the ultimate goal, even going back to January, going back to December, going back to September, whenever it may be, was just stay in the division. Newcastle United have to remain in the Premier League for this to be a real viable option. And no awkward conversations have to take place between buyer and seller should it eventually get the green light. And look, there is some positivity out there with regards to that, and rightfully so. And I think it's really, really heartening. I mentioned last week to see the personal side from PCP and Murdad Hadusi talking about things and tweeting about results and just playing it out like fans like us. I think that's a really positive thing. And obviously we know from conversations that we have, from sources you speak to, that these things are still ongoing and they still have everybody at the table and still want to buy the football club. But there are fans out there who doubt that. And I think the little tweets show that at least surely you don't have to listen to me, you don't have to listen to Steve, you don't have to listen to anybody else. Surely you can see by the fact that he's taken an active interest week by week on Newcastle United staying in this division, shows that there is still something there. So even the gravest doubters of any kind of takeover in the future can look at that surely and say, look, I don't think he's just taking the mickey here and pulling everyone along for a ride. I don't think he's just got Newcastle on his card for the week and he's waiting on a bumper pay coming in from Ladbrokes. I think he's actually interested in Newcastle United's results. You know what I mean? So look, I'm positive. I'm positive they got that result. Newcastle United can go down to cup finals and things like that and get beat. Big games that matter, they get beat. They went and got a result in a game that really, really matters. And I'm positive about it.
Yeah, okay. We are going to take lots of questions tonight. So those on Twitter who sent them, as again, I said earlier, thanks very much for doing it. Craig Irvine says, any truth behind the rumours that St Maximin is totally unhappy with having Bruce as a manager? I've heard from a few sources that he's looking for a way out if Bruce is still here at the start of the season. Any truth in that, Liam, as far as you're concerned?
There's been some problems between Alan St Maximin and Steve Bruce since the day that the Frenchman walked through the door, effectively. It was talked up as if it was a Steve Bruce signing. I know Steve Bruce wanted to take credit for the likes of him and Joe Linton, etc. But those deals, as we all know, were put well underway a long, long time before Steve Bruce was even mentioned in a conversation at Newcastle United. So he can't take credit for those. But there has been issues. The first player that Steve Bruce actually called out for being a difficult person to manage at this football club, and it was quite early last season, was Alan St Maximin. There's been issues there. There's been problems, but he is an enigmatic type player. He's a character. He's high maintenance. I think that's how Steve Bruce described him. And I don't think there is a great relationship there between them. But I think Alan St Maximin has actually, in the public domain at least, been reasonably professional about that. Whenever he's been asked about Steve Bruce, he always backs his manager. And that's all you can kind of expect him to do. He hasn't always had that 100% backing from Steve Bruce. As I said, he was the first person that he called out. But I do think there is pressures behind the scenes in that sense. I also think there is a possibility that Alan St-Maximin leaves the football club this summer. I think that is a distinct possibility. But I think if Alan St-Maximin does leave the football club this summer, Newcastle United will be richly rewarded for the player because he signed a long-term contract. I think it was a 6-year, remembering back. That was a renewed, improved deal that he signed not long after signing for the football club. So Newcastle United have got the player under contract and they will, and remaining in the division, there isn't going to be any kind of clauses or contracts that come into place. And I think you'll find Alan St-Maximin, if he does leave the football club, it'll be for a rather large sum. The other question in that sort of sphere is, would anybody pay a reasonable sum for Alan St-Maximin? I think they would pay good money for him, but money's going to be a funny one this summer. We don't really 100% know without poring over confidential how exactly what the state of finances in the Premier League and beyond is. I think a lot of clubs are going to be affected by COVID, the lack of fans, reduced commercial revenues. There's going to be real problems for clubs in their accounts down the line. And I'm not sure how many clubs will be awash with, look here, go and give Newcastle United 40 odd million or whatever for Alan St-Maximin. I don't know how many.
Oh, we've lost Liam there. Bad internet signal down in his neck of the woods. We'll wait for him to come back. He might have to go out and come back. Whilst he is doing that, I will say thank you to our sponsors, which of course is Spider VPN. They've been with us for the last couple of months now. Big shout out to those guys. And they're great for all your internet security. Check them out on their website. We're also going to say a big thank you to Arcot Interiors. And they are available to contact on 0191 265 8663. Email enquiries at arcot.org.uk or their website www.arcotinteriors.com. Well worth a visit. Have a look at the website. Some excellent kitchens there. Well worth a look. And also a big shout out to John at qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Newcastle. And also a big shout out to John at Jab Signature, who makes all of our promotional material, our flyers and posters. And if you're a first time visitor to the channel, then click onto the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right hand corner. And that's it. You subscribe to the channel. Hit the thumbs up, which is the like button, and click share, which shares it to the social media. And drop into the comments. Usually when we're live, there is always somebody to chat to. There should be somebody there to chat to tonight as well. I hope you're all enjoying the show. And don't forget as well, John from QTech has also set our website up, NUFCmatters.com. You can get on there and you can see some fantastic t-shirts that he is pushing on there. We've also got the Cult t-shirt, which he brought out last week. I think he did a roaring trade on that. And don't forget, we are doing the t-shirt for the food bank. I had to laugh when he did this one. Steve Wraith is God t-shirt. It is a one-off, thank the Lord. And that is available on my Twitter account at Steve Wraith. It's pinned at the top. All proceeds go to the food bank. And tomorrow night, Wednesday night, we will have pre-recorded the retro show as well. I will be joined by George and Neil Mitchell and Steve Hasty and Steve Wilkinson for that show. And we're looking at games between Newcastle United and Luton Town. And on Thursday night, as always, we're back to being live. It'll be me, Gibbo and Supermac. And then Friday night will be the three amigos. Liam is back, got his internet issues sorted out. And yeah, Liam, let's move on to the next question. Don't worry, mate. You were going in and out to start with, so I had a little indication it was going to happen. Grant Thurlaway says, do you and Liam think if we survive and there's no takeover by the start of the new season, that Bruce will be given another chance, or will we have a new manager? What do you think about that, Liam?
It's an interesting question. My gut feeling is that Steve Bruce will remain as manager if Newcastle United stay in the division. That is my gut feeling. There are a number of things that could change that. There could be problems. He might not want to stay. I think the hierarchy will want him to stay, but I think most importantly, the one thing that could change all that is any kind of takeover. And I don't imagine that we'll be sitting here in a year's time, if Newcastle United are still in the Premier League, talking about this current takeover. I just don't believe we'll be here in a year's time. And I think that's probably the next thing that'll have a big say on whether Steve Bruce remains or there is a new manager at the helm.
Okay, Burnsy asks, has arbitration begun? Yes or no? He says that he's heard from someone close to the club that it has indeed started and been ongoing for some weeks. He said, yet the Chronicle reported last week in an article that arbitration had not even begun. I can understand everyone's frustration on this, Liam. I don't know whether it started or not. Can you shed any light on it?
Well, what I would say is I've heard the same rumours. I've heard the same rumours from people, but nothing from any official sources that say it has or hasn't. Everybody's really tight-lipped. I wish I could give more information than that, but I don't know, as you find yourself, Steve, that we don't know whether it has started or hasn't started. I've got a good feeling on it. I'd imagine it probably has. That's my feeling on it. But anybody out there, I wouldn't judge on my feeling as to whether it has or not, because I don't know if it has. Factually, I don't know. But I think it probably has. I think the time scales suggest that it probably has. But again, that's purely guesswork on my part. The official line from people in and around it on all sides is nothing. It's silence, it's quiet, and they're not giving anything away. And it's quite important in this confidential process that there aren't any kind of leaks. And I think it's good, heartening, although frustrating, to hear that there aren't any kind of leaks coming out anywhere, apart from obviously the viewers, club source, whoever it may be, leaking things. But that's certainly not information from a legitimate 100% source that's come my way.
Yeah, Facts Rafa on Twitter, on your account, on your shout out for questions. He did say, should 17th be celebrated or is it a massive underachievement? Well, you've already covered that earlier in the show. He does go down the stats route. He says Burnley had 24 shots, the most shots that they've had in 33 Premier League games since playing 9-man Norwich, and had 17 attempted goal in our area, the most that they have had in their Premier League history. How concerning is that? And did ASM actually hide a horrendous team performance?
So I'll address the later questions first. It doesn't matter. Is it concerning? Of course. Long term, of course it is. But we know it's nothing new that we gift opposition sides chances galore, no matter who they are. But was I concerned about that on Sunday? No, because the result ultimately is all that mattered. And again, on Saturday against West Ham, if Newcastle United have 16% possession, if Newcastle United have 32 shots against them from West Ham on goal but win 1-0, I don't care, because we're at the business point of the season and that's all that matters, the final result. Of course it's concerning long term, but it's nothing new. We've known that since last season, really, that Steve Bruce has not been able to set a Newcastle United side up which can do a bit of both, a bit of attacking and some solid defending. It's either one or the other, and it's very rarely the first one. Newcastle United have been quite porous, really, since he abandoned the Rafa model maybe 4 or 5 months into his first season. When he took the huff for that one and threw that one out the window, then it pretty much the defensive solidity went out the window with it. I don't think we're going to change that. I don't think a summer of Steve Bruce will change that again. I don't think any new coaches brought in are going to change that either. I think it would have to be a total new broom sweeping through to change that. I do think the players are there to be a lot more solid, but there would be improvements needed. And I think midfield is one of the key areas that there are improvements needed. I've been really impressed with Sean Longstaff since he's come in the last 2 games. I'm less than impressed by Jonjo Shelby, but any regular watchers on here will know that he's not my favourite player anyway. I thought Miguel Almiron was running down a lot of blind alleys. I don't think he played anywhere near as well in that midfield as what he did against Tottenham. So that's the area for me that would arguably need some considerable improvement. And I think you could look back at that game against Burnley, and it seems harsh to put it down to individual displays, but I would argue the 3 central defenders, when I seen that team sheet, people who watch this will know that I always do tend to sort of fall back on sticking up for Jamal Lascelles because I think he's a leader And I do understand that he's not the most naturally gifted player, but I think they miss him. Every time he's out for any length of time, they do miss him in that team. And as soon as he goes out the team this time, arguably he could have said, that's possibly Newcastle United's best looking back three that you'd put together. You could argue that with bringing Clark back in for Kraft and Fernandez basically covering in for Lascelles, or vice versa, as it turned out the way they laid the team out. But it wasn't. It was much, much weaker. Newcastle United were really bad defensively. I put my player ratings in for the team, and I think I gave Fernandez a 5, who looked rusty as hell. I think I gave Kieran Clark and Paul Dummett 4s because I think they were terrible. Kieran Clark looked like a schoolboy defender for that first goal. The header, then the sort of way he was done by Chris Wood on the outside. It was quite incredible. I've never seen Kieran Clark done like that. Maybe it may be a strange little thing, but taking a left-footed centre half and putting him slightly out to the right, he just looked all out of sorts. He didn't look anywhere near the same sort of player as what he did on that side as to the other side. But look, and Paul Dummett was poor against Tottenham for the second goal as well. I don't think Paul Dummett, since he's gone to that back 3, 5, whatever you might think it is, I don't think Paul Dummett's played that well. And I think that's a position that looks as though with his attributes would naturally suit him quite well, playing the left of that 3. Paul Dummett had a big impact when he came in as the fullback in the 4. And when he came in for Jamal Lewis, he just solidified things a lot more, and he was in the right place at the right time. But he's gone back into the 3 and hasn't looked the same player. So I think ultimately there is. I wrote an analysis piece yesterday on the Gazette, if anybody sees it, and that was one of my things that I picked out from the game. It was unexpected defensive headache Newcastle United and Steve Bruce now have going into West Ham, because you would argue those 3 central defenders looked absolutely out of sorts. They looked like they hadn't seen each other, never mind played with each other. And it was lucky that they had Martin Dubravka behind them, who arguably had one of his best games since he signed for Newcastle United. I like the way he flapped at a couple of crosses, and there was moments here and there where were a little bit hairy, but he was confident. And everybody in that defence knew he was coming for every single ball, and he challenged with the big forwards, the big defenders on every set piece, every corner, and I think he got rewarded for it. That confidence really, really told. And I would argue, as Alan St-Maximin's taken a lot of the plaudits, and rightly so, for his match-winning performance and assisting a goal. But if Martin Dubravka hadn't kept Newcastle United in it for that 10 to 15 minutes in the second half, when they didn't really start again in the second half, then I think Newcastle United would have been looking at a totally different situation. These conversations we're having today, Steve, would have been more along the lines of, when are Newcastle United ever going to take an opportunity handed to them? And would have been looking at the way West Ham performed and thinking, God, how we're gonna keep them quiet if Burnley's creating whatever Rafa Fact said, 27, 70, whatever he said, shots on goal or whatever. How many is West Ham going to get? Because they were absolutely sensational for 80 minutes against Leicester. Yesterday, I had it on in the background when I was finishing my work. Such a quick, attack-minded, sharp-looking side that if Newcastle hadn't scraped that result, no matter how they did it, and got that little barrier between themselves and the bottom 3, I think we'd be really panicking now going into that West Ham game, thinking, wow, anything, a draw would be like a remarkable result, because even though they've got big injuries to big players, to me they look like a side that are really full of confidence and will be happy to take on anybody.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Chris A says, anything to the rumours that Bruce will have been negotiating an exit settlement once he secures safety, or does he definitely plan to be back next season either way? He's frozen again, unfortunately. Can you hear us, Liam? Are you with us, Liam, or not? Clearly some internet issues for Liam tonight. Not sure what's going on. Maybe he's going to need to go out and come back in again. Can you hear us, Liam? No, not sure what's going on with Liam. Apologies for this. Clearly some kind of internet issue going on with Liam. I'll take him back out and bring him back in once he gets his his stuff sorted out. We'll go try and bring him back in again. Liam, can you hear us?
I don't think there's...
Gone again. Apologies for this tonight. Technology letting us down, unfortunately. We will try and get through as many of your questions as possible. I'll take him back out, and hopefully he will be able to reset his system and come back in. As I've said earlier on, just a reminder of what's coming up for the rest of the week. Tomorrow night is Retro Night. On Wednesday night, of course, we will be looking at games between Newcastle and Luton Town. That's Steve Wilkinson, George Mitchell, Neil Mitchell and Steve Hasty. Join me tomorrow. And then on Thursday night, I'm back with Supermac and with John Gibson. And then Friday night, as usual, it is the Three Amigos night. Plenty of stuff coming up on the channel. And a lot of you asking about different interviews that we've done and are they still there. If you check out the playlists on the YouTube channel, you will be able to find a lot of the stuff that we've done. If you look under the 90s players interviews, you'll find a lot of the stuff that we've done over the last year with Lee Clark, with Rob Lee, Steve Howie, in particular, 3 ex-players who've given a lot of time on the show. Warren Barton shows all on there as well. If you look in the celebrity playlist, you will find a lot of interviews with the likes of Alan McGee and Bez from the Happy Mondays. Some of the ex-players interviews are in there as well. There's also, different stuff for everybody on the channel. So have a look, see what you fancy. And if you've got a spare couple of hours and you want to watch something a little bit different, then get yourself onto the playlist and you will find it on there. Don't forget our sponsors, Spider VPN, and of course, Jab Signature, qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend in Newcastle. And also a big shout out as well to Arcot Interiors, 0191 265 8663, and get onto their website, www.arcotinteriors.com. The pledge as well, which we've covered on the Three Amigos, is still ongoing. We are hoping to have somebody from the Supporters Trust coming on in the next 5 to 6 days. That is where you can find out the details about the pledge, 1892pledge.co.uk. Some of you will have already pledged to that, of course. I think at the last count, I think 5,000 people had pledged, and I think they were heading towards the £50,000 mark. That will, of course, have changed now. But interesting to hear what the Trust have got to say, and I'm sure we will be able to get questions from you lot when you are in the live chat. And as I've already pointed out as well, the T-shirt, which is up for grabs for the food bank this week, is on my Twitter timeline. It'll be up there till Friday. All proceeds from this T-shirt will go to the food bank. And John from QTech likes to have a laugh making these T-shirts. And I think this is just in reference to the fact that we've been called a cult on more than one occasion. Steve Wraith is God T-shirt is now available. Just simply go on to my Twitter account, give us a follow on there, which is at Steve Wraith, and then just place your bid underneath. And that's it. The proceeds will all go to the food bank. And I'm not sure what that's up to at the moment, but I know we are always, in and around the £70-80 mark. It's not a great deal, but that will go a long way to helping with the food bank. And no sign of Liam, unfortunately. I'm not sure whether he's rebooting his computer, whether he's had an absolute nightmare with his internet, or whether he has, just had a complete breakdown. It's a little bit difficult to say, and obviously with me not doing this live, I'm probably going to pause the show there now and then come back and try and connect the show together. So we're going to call it a day for now, and I will be back hopefully in a part 2. Welcome back to part 2. Liam's got his technical issues sorted out. I hope he's moved downstairs, so fingers crossed. Let's try and whiz through a few of these questions, Liam, so keep the answers, because we've got quite a few and I want to try and get through as many as we can. Andrew says, hi, Steve and Liam. Any idea what's happening with Matty Longstaff? Is he still being frozen out?
Yeah, he is kind of in and around the edges of the first team squad. He was a player who might have went down to Burnley the other day, but was pulled out at the last minute with Andy Carroll being past fit. Yeah, it's a really frustrating situation for anybody who values the player and thinks he could add value to Newcastle United's team. Steve Bruce just isn't in that camp. He doesn't believe that he does. Thinks the player needs to show a lot more. I just think he couldn't be. He sees the player every day, so only he knows, and the people around know exactly whether he's putting it in and all that kind of thing. But the reports that you hear from it, he is, and he's doing really well in training. So, yeah, I think it's a real shame that he's been frozen. Now, I personally have said it on here before. I think the treatment of the player has been a disgrace. I think if you had an idea that you weren't going to play him between now and the end of the season, you should let him go out on loan. It showed no long to medium term planning for a player who's a Geordie lad who cares about the football club, wants to be here and wants to play in black and white. And I think Newcastle United are really missing a trick with him, as they are already starting to do with Elliot Anderson at such a young age.
Okay, Andy Holtby says, is there any news on our new kit for next season, i.e. the new manufacturer and sponsor?
I haven't had any concrete information on that, but it sounds as though it's going to be Castori, who do Rangers kit this season. They've had issues with that, but I don't see a problem in changing kit supplier in particular, because I think Puma, Newcastle United are just a part of the Puma empire. There's never really been any thought process, any concept in the design of Newcastle United's kit, bar the odd one. And look, I think they're a poor quality generic brand. And I think Newcastle United could do no worse than go to somebody who might actually treat them as a bespoke club and do them properly, as sort of Adidas did at the start of their process. Not so much in the later years, of course, when Newcastle United became less and less relevant in terms of world football and European football. But yeah, I think I don't see. There certainly won't be any tears shed in this household with the quality of Newcastle United football strips. I just think it can't be much worse than what they are under Puma.
Okay, Keith from NCSL says, hi lads, Gale has had 180 minutes recently now and not done a lot. Joe Linton has had 20 plus games. At what point should the manager give Carroll and Anderson some game time?
That time's already gone for me. I think Anderson could and should have had games before now. I don't think Andy Carroll's a starting player largely. It would have been out of desperation had Andy Carroll got any starts, but I do think he could have had an impact off the bench in certain games when Newcastle United have been struggling. Again, he's a player who's desperate to stay at the football club, who bleeds black and white, and I think we could and should have seen a lot more of him. Elliot Anderson's a total different kettle of fish. He's obviously not a forward. He's an attacking midfielder at 10. Can play a little deeper breaking forward, but I think we definitely should have seen a little bit more, especially the little cameo that he had at Arsenal. He also had another little cameo in the league as well. I think it's sad we haven't seen a little bit more of him, because I think he could have had an impact on games. He's a very talented individual, and next season is going to be a big one. Is it the time to send him out on loan? It probably is, but he's nearly ready for Newcastle United. He's that good. He's knocking on the door at Newcastle United now. I think we'll probably see him go out on loan in the summer. But that's what should have happened to Matty Longstaff last season. We should have been talking about him going out on loan. Instead, we're talking about this contract wrangle, because Newcastle United had no plans to put together a plan for their young player. That's what they wanted. They wanted to see, is he going to be part of Newcastle's plans, or do you have a medium-term plan for him? Send him out on loan, then he'll be a first-team player. They need to start making these plans very quickly, because Elliot Anderson will soon turn into a Matty Longstaff if he isn't treated right.
Okay, Jeff Carter says, hi Liam, after ASM scored, the Steves did some daddy dancing, but Jones was on the touchline shouting instructions, Rafa-like. What do you make of the Jones-Bruce dynamic, and who should get the credit?
I'll be honest, I thought Steve Bruce was pretty sharp. He was, when St. Maximin scored, the camera pans to him and he's talking Kieran Clark through some defensive sort of problems that they're having. So I'm not going to fall into this idea that Jones only does one thing and Steve Bruce does the other. I think we've talked about that a lot. We know that Steve Bruce picks the team still. We know that Graham Jones largely does the training in the week from Monday to Friday, or might only be 2 or 3 days in the week, or whatever it may turn out to be, Newcastle United. But that's, it is reasonably common that those things happen, but he's quite a hands-off manager. That isn't reasonably common. Managers are only a bit more hands-on than Steve Bruce. on the training pitch. And on the touchline, I think it's a mixed bag. I think all the coaches do. It's hard to tell. Is what in defence of the question, it's really hard to tell unless you're watching the game itself and at the game. I think if everybody was in stadiums, you would see that Steve Bruce isn't the mute on the sidelines that everybody thinks he is. And Graham Jones is this brand new bloke who comes in shouting and bawling all the time and barking out the orders. It's a mix. Being brutally honest, it's a mix of all of them. All of the coaches getting involved and talking to players and barking out orders.
John Ramsey says, what's the latest crack on the problem between Shelby and Willock? Blue Eye Boy comment by Shelby. And do you think Willock will get any more game time now that Shelby is captain? Yeah, a lot of rumours coming out of the club about there being some kind of fallout between those two. Not sure if there's any mileage in them or not.
No, I've heard the same rumours, Steve. It is something that seems to be doing the rounds. There's a lot of rumours coming out of that squad at the moment. I'll address the one on whether I think Joe Willock will get any game time between now and the end of the season. And yes, I'm pretty sure he will. It doesn't quite work with his system. He doesn't quite fit into it, but he can. Obviously, it's pretty nailed down. I think Almiron will continue. Sean Longstaff's done more than enough to continue. And I think that's the position, the Sean Longstaff one, that Willock's kind of lost in the last few weeks. I think he'll come back. He obviously can't. Everyone's got to remember he'll definitely miss one or be unavailable for one of the final 7 games. Newcastle United play Arsenal in a few weeks' time, and obviously he can't play against his parent club. But outside of that, I would imagine he'll at least get another few starts. And I like him. I think he's a good player, and I think Steve Bruce likes him. And I think it would be no surprise now if Newcastle United stay in the Premier League. We still have to say if it looks largely like they've got 1 foot remaining in the Premier League. They've still got a lot of work to do, potentially, depending on the form of Fulham. But I would think if Newcastle need to stay in the division, I think Joe Willock will be a player they'll be looking to keep.
Wayne Bennett says, I keep hearing about the new contracts for players, but have any actually been signed yet? And to whom and for how long, if so?
The one that I know has it been done? It's impossible to know have these things been done unless you're there with them putting the pen to paper. Because these things do to and fro all the time with contracts between agents and representatives and players and people in boardrooms, etc. But Fabian Shaw is the one that will get extended for a year because Newcastle United, whether Fabian Shaw stays at the football club or not, and there were rumours he was going to leave in January, I imagine he might well leave in the summer as well. But Newcastle United will definitely take up the year extension on Shaw. And I imagine there probably will be takers. It won't cost anybody a large amount of money, but Newcastle United will definitely protect that asset because they've got the option. They've got the option to take another year on him. Fede Fernandez is the one that I'll skim over Jacob Murphy because I think he'll get a new deal. I know there's been talks. Sean Longstaff's one that's been on, off. He isn't one of the better players in the squad. And I think his standing in the squad is slightly better than his standing in terms of wages. So I think that's one they'll look to do and extend a little longer because I think he may only have another season and a bit left on his current deal, or maybe 2 seasons. That's one that's always on, off. And I think that one might get done at some point. Beyond that, Andy Carroll's an interesting one, but Fede Fernandez is the one that I think is a key one to get done. And I think there is a little bit of uncertainty around that deal. I don't think it's a nailed on that he will sign the extension. At his age, it's his last big contract, you would imagine, in professional football, particularly in the Premier League. And I think he's looking to get this one right. I don't know if Newcastle United are quite offering what he wants, but this often happens in contract negotiations. You'll always have that to and fro, and that somebody will offer something and then there'll be a counter offer and etc. etc. So I would imagine Fede Fernandez might get done, but I don't think that one's imminent. Fabian Shaw is one that I'm certain will get done. Sean Longstaff, I'm certain will probably get done as well, a little bit further down the line. Jacob Murphy, I'll probably put in that camp as well. Andy Carroll, I think will probably get another year. And I think Fede Fernandez might get done, but I think that'll take a lot more to and fro. And a lot depends on the kind of offers he's getting from elsewhere as well, because he's an experienced former Argentina international defender, done a good, however long it may be now, 5-6 years in the Premier League, being a really solid performer. I think there'll be a lot of takers for him if he were to leave. He doesn't have the other year. because Newcastle United took last summer, they took up that year extension. So yeah, I think Fabian Shaw is the one that will probably next get announced.
Alan White's just wanting to know why Atsu never really got a look in under Bruce, because Alan feels Atsu always did a good job for us. Why do you think Atsu didn't really impress Bruce?
I think Atsu, even to the manager who signed him, had his limitations. I think I've talked about this on the show before about Rafa Benitez feeling the need to make the deal permanent. I don't think in an ideal world, Christian Atsu probably would have stayed at Newcastle United beyond that one season on loan in the Championship. He was signed for a particular purpose. I don't think after that season, where he was okay, I don't think he would have been kept on. The reason he was signed on a permanent basis was because the deal had already been agreed that he could go for a certain amount of money. It only had to be activated and triggered, and Rafa Benitez made sure he triggered it because he had his fingers burned with other deals that he'd set up in that January. I don't think Christian Atsu is anything beyond a bottom three top Championship player, and I think he's probably got to be viewed as that. And I think Steve Bruce has probably looked in that area and thought, can we improve? And that's one area that he thinks he can. There'll be other players in this squad who may there's probably the same fate again this summer. But I think this summer is going to be a really interesting window for everybody. Obviously, Christian Atsu is one who will leave, but the amount of money kicking around is debatable, and it'll be interesting to see if there are so many movers. I think a lot of people will be looking to hang on to players who are going to go out of contract. I think you'll maybe see less players going out in contract, but I'm just speculating. And I don't think you'll see huge moves. I think you'll see a lot of loan deals, a lot of buy me now, pay later kind of thing going on, and 2-year loan deals and 18-month deals and things like that. I think there'll be a slight change in the market this summer, but I suppose only time will tell. We'll soon find out.
Yeah, I'd agree. Atsu certainly does have his limitations. Danny says, would Liam change the system against West Ham to accommodate Wilson and Maxi, since we were so sluggish in the first half against Burnley? Plus, we beat West Ham using 4-4-2 earlier.
I would be tempted. I think one of the standout performers that's really suited has been Jacob Murphy. It's really suited him, this system. I think he's played it really well. It would be a really harsh one to call, because he's probably one of the players that would have to drop out. We go back to a 4 at the back. I suspect he'll probably keep with the same. I think he'll probably keep with the same 5. And probably, why couldn't he? I'll throw the question out there. It's a shame we haven't got a live one tonight, but why couldn't he just go with the 2 up front and play St. Maximin? Didn't work there earlier in the season. But given a bit more license to run, maybe it would work against West Ham. I don't know. But Callum Wilson has to start. If he's fit enough, he has to start. And I think we've seen with St. Maximin, if he's fit enough to get a good 60 minutes under his belt, which he seems as though he's got at least a half under his belt, then I would be starting him as well. I'd like to see a change back. I know a lot of people out there might not like it, but I'd like to see a change back ultimately to the team that did really well. The 4-3-3. I like that. I think it suits Wilson, it suits Almiron, it suits St. Maximin. Then you're going to have to bring someone potentially like a Willock back into the side. But it's the right back position. Jacob Murphy's not a right back. Matt Ritchie isn't a left back either. That's got to be remembered as well. You're probably going to have to change the 2 full back positions. And arguably, Matt Ritchie's brought a tremendous, not energy in terms of legs, but a tremendous mental energy. He's brought a real winner's mentality. And I'll be the first to admit here and hold my hands up. Me and you, Steve, have begged to differ, but you were right. And I was wrong. Look, I've never been Matt Ritchie's biggest fan. I think he's gone over the hill, etc. But they've really needed him. They've needed that energy, that
experience, man.
Yeah, they've needed that. And he's come in and been brilliant for me. He's
a captain without the armband.
Yes, he is, yeah. I agree. And it's been exactly what they've needed in these last couple of games. And then they've got somebody on the other side, Jacob Murphy, who runs away kissing the badge after scoring the goal. His parents are from the area. He was brought up a Newcastle fan. It's that just little 5% in matters.
And that little thing that I tell you what, Steve Bruce, if there's something he deserves credit for this season, and the one thing that'll have helped keep Newcastle up, it's being the bigger man and sorting that problem that he's had out with Ritchie.
Ritchie and Sean Longstaff. I think there's been two issues there, and whatever they've done, I think you're absolutely spot on, Steve. To be honest, I've not been one to really praise Bruce that much in a long time, to be honest. But one thing I really called for in the run up to that international break was just put the fires out. He needs to look. Those fires have burned and burned and burned for too long. Sean Longstaff far too long. Matt Ritchie, the problems were allowed to burn away. He needed to fix them, and he has. He did it with Dwight Gale as well. Previous to that, there were problems there, as we know, and he's put that fire out. And I think he does deserve a little bit of credit because, look, it was him and the players' problem why they were in the issues. The issues were allowed to grow like they did. But it was good. It's now good to see that those things have kind of been. They might not have all been forgotten and gone, but they've at least been shelved to concentrate on what really matters, and that was keeping Newcastle United in the division.
Yep, I would agree, mate. Graham Townsley wants to know what your thoughts are on VAR. Been an absolute nightmare for VAR this weekend. For me, it's been a nightmare all season. But he's just saying, surely for the greatest league in the world, this is embarrassing. All other leagues don't get wrong. Surely now is time to get ex-players in the VAR room. I think the refs are getting worse. He says, I think it's lazy leaving it to VAR and not knowing how to use VAR. He says it's such bad decisions being made, Graham Townsley says.
Cheers for the question, Graham. It's a really good topical question. What I would say is I don't have a problem with VAR. VAR is not the problem here. The camera seeing what it's seen, and it's the people who are then using their knowledge of the laws to apply that got it wrong. It isn't. The VAR itself is not the problem. It can be a helpful tool in football, and I'm certain of it, and it has been in certain situations. It is the people applying the rules that are the problem.
Yeah, I would agree, mate. I think you're right. Just trying to find some other questions before we start finishing off. Oh, Baz, he says, do you think Rafa is still holding out for a Toon return? It's rumours that he's knocked back Premier League job, and it does seem as if he's waiting for something to come along.
Yeah, I think he wants to come back to Newcastle United. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I've been quite consistent in my approach with when talking about Rafa Benitez since we had that news that Rafa Benitez is the type of manager who has to work. He isn't somebody who's happy sitting watching all of these games on his TV in his family home. He wants to be hands-on. He wants to be back on a training pitch. He wants to be impacting things properly. And he wants to get the next stage of his career correct. I think even he would argue that maybe he's made some bad decisions in some of the clubs that he's taken over his time in his managerial career. A fantastic manager and done some amazing jobs at some of those places, but hasn't always maybe made the best next step in his career. And I think this is a really crucial one for him. I think he wants to make sure he gets it right. And I think he would ideally want to come back to Newcastle. And he does know himself, having been part of this process, in this takeover process, that PCP have got him right at the top of their list of people they want to manage and take this project forward. So I think he largely will hang around to see if things pan out correctly with Newcastle United. But as I've said previously, if, for example, an Arsenal or a Leicester or somebody fighting in and around the top 6 to 8 in the Premier League, if somebody like that comes in, knocks on his door and offers him a job, I think he'll take that. I don't think he will then knock it back to hang on for Newcastle United. But I think Newcastle United is the project that he wanted whenever he came. Was it 5 years ago nearly now? 5 years ago. That was the project he wanted. And he left the project totally unfinished. I would say he maybe got through 10% of what he wanted to probably do in the time he was at Newcastle United. He wasn't allowed. He was hamstrung. He had both hands tied behind his back at Newcastle United by the ownership. And I think he would come back here in a heartbeat. But like I say, if a Leicester comes along, if a West Ham, who've been very interested, I know that's a club he nearly did take the West Ham job. That's a similar type project. If somebody like that comes knocking, then I think he'll quite happily take that job. And good luck to him, because I couldn't blame him for doing exactly the same thing. I think most people would in his position. But he wants a Newcastle job back in an ideal world.
Roger Cook, I'll take one of his questions. He's asked a few. How did you rate Shelby's captaincy?
Captaincy, it's hard to tell. I'm not going to judge too much. If I was there at the game, I'll be able to give you a fair answer. I wasn't at the game, of course. I was watching on TV, much like everybody else. Such is the position, with only certain amounts of people allowed into the ground. In COVID, you don't get companies allowed more than one at any one time, so I wasn't actually there. His captaincy, he's not my ideal pick for a captain. Never would be. I don't think he leads. He's not a leader in any way, shape or form. I think almost he's a bad influence in some ways because he's one of the highest paid players at the football club. But I don't think he puts as much effort in as a lot of people much further down the pecking order in terms of money. I don't think he's a great role model in that sense. Is he a good leader, captain? You don't see him really barking out that many orders. Does he lead by example in charging around and winning tackles and really sort of wearing his heart on his sleeve? Doesn't do that either. So no, I, as a pick, I would never have John Joe Shelby as a captain. I would very rarely have John Joe Shelby as a first pick in my team as well in centre midfield. I do think he has his values and has his place at times, but I don't think he's the most consistent or reliable player, and I don't think that makes for a good captain.
I'll have a 99 there, Liam. I can hear the ice cream van.
He's literally just pulled it outside my house.
It's like, but you've got that sorted, haven't you? Good stuff for the kids.
He always pulls up right outside my house, and he always wants to crack about the football. He's always going, "What's happening? The takeover happening."
Brilliant. Lisa's 8 says, what's the likelihood in percentage terms do you genuinely feel that there is any potential buyer handing over part of the club to a third party? I'd say it's 0, but I'm keen to hear your views. I think this is probably referring to the trust's launch of the pledge, which we haven't talked about. So I'm interested to know your views on it. I suppose you've clearly done a little bit of articles on it, and I know that you on your own podcast with the Shields Gazette are going to have the lads and lasses potentially on this week from the trust. So make sure people tune into that. It'll be interesting to hear what they've got to say. But what overall do you think that any potential buyer is going to give 1% to the trust?
No, not at all. No, I don't. Not in any way, shape, or form. I think if you're going to view this as anything, it's got to be more viewed as. I described it as a disaster pension pot. Somebody else described it much wiser than me on Twitter. They came back with a disaster life. It's like a life insurance, football club life insurance. I think that's purely the way it's got to be viewed. I wouldn't be paying your money in if you feel like you need it or you feel like you definitively want a stake in the football club, because I think a stake in the football club is going to be really, really difficult for the trust to get. You can't rule it out. It could happen at some point in the future, but like I say, it would have to be a real disaster at Newcastle United. I get the idea. I spoke with Alex Hurst on the phone. We've exchanged text messages in the last few days as well, and we talked, and he says it's better to do something than nothing at all, and I kind of do concur with that. And when everything feels so helpless as it does now, sometimes it can feel better for some people to be doing something rather than nothing. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get the results that it wants. 1% of a football club, would that give you any real power? It wouldn't give you any real power, but I think it would be quite an achievement for a supporters trust to get 1% of any football club, because it doesn't happen that often really in English football, and it doesn't happen all that often at all in top flight football anywhere. So I think it'll be quite an achievement if they do manage to do it. That's my view on it. But yeah, we'll be speaking to it could well be Ian Mearns is going to come on, we think, at the moment on the Mouth of the Time podcast. We should be doing that on Thursday maybe, and it could be somebody like Alex or Charlotte from the trust as well, potentially coming on with myself and Miles Starforth, and we'll discuss that a little bit more. If anybody's got any kind of questions that they want to put to us to put to them, honestly, give us a shout on Twitter, send us a private message, just at us in a question, and I'll see if I can put it to them.
Good stuff. We'll take another question from Ryan. He says, why do you think Shelby's playing ahead of Matty Longstaff and Willock? Shelby's lazy and a liability in our midfield. Willock and Matty both have played better than him. Does it pay to talk to Steve Bruce? That's what he thinks. What's your view? I've got to say, Shelby again, I agree with Ryan. I do think he's lazy. I do think he's a liability. And again, it creates issues for a back three or, back five when the midfield's not picking up and doing the job and letting people run through the middle.
Yeah, well, I've said that before. I think there is no... Shelby plays the deeper of the three in that midfield, and there isn't really a direct replacement. There's nobody else apart from Isaac Hayden, who's out for the season, that can play that role as well, really. Sean Longstaff can do it, did it under Rafa Benitez, but is not his natural role. Rafa coached Longstaff when he came into the side to play that much deeper role. And Newcastle United played from defence into midfield through Sean Longstaff in that really rich period that he had when he first came into the side and looked an absolute world beater. Comparisons to Michael Carrick, better than Declan Rice, all these kind of things. We've seen somebody like Declan Rice absolutely accelerating light years ahead of a player like Sean Longstaff. But he can't play that role. Matty Longstaff could also play that role, but really doesn't come naturally to him. He isn't a number 4 sitting right in front of the back four, but that's where Shelby kind of tends to operate. I think Sean could probably play that role if needed because he's done it before, but it's, again, not natural. Could you argue you play Sean in that deeper role and bring Willock into the side? Would it give more legs? Would it give more energy? Yeah, I think it's hard to argue that it wouldn't. But I think I don't like Shelby and I wouldn't normally pick him. But I think it's hard to argue that there's anybody definitely can come in and play that exact role that he does. Isaac Hayden would have been the obvious one. Hayden isn't anywhere near as good on the ball, but he can be a stopper. And he has that in him to play that deeper role and move it on to others. But I think of the current fit squad, I think Sean Longstaff's probably the one that could do it. It would certainly be an attack in midfield if you played Sean Longstaff and then you played Willock and Almiron on either side of him. I actually really quite like the look of that. I think that's got good legs. It's got good energy. It's good distribution, good on the ball, good ball carriers. Willock and Almiron are both very good carriers of the ball at speed with the ball at feet. That's one thing Willock doesn't seem to get a lot of credit for from people, but very, very good carrier of the ball, takes players on in a gliding kind of way. And Almiron's very similar. Didn't work from the other day. Like I said, he ran down a lot of blind alleys, I thought, particularly in that first hour or so against Burnley. But he's a valuable player in this Newcastle United side, whether he plays up front or out wide or in midfield. And I would like to see Joe Willock come back in. But what I'm trying to say is on the Shelby front and Longstaff is I can see why Steve continues to pick Shelby. And I don't necessarily think it's just because he's mates with him and gets on with him. I can actually see there is some, personally, I can see a little bit of logic behind it.
Yeah. All right, great stuff, mate. Thanks for doing the pre-record. Apologies again that we're not live. Apologies for the technical problems, but we got there in the end. Some great questions. Thanks for sending all your questions. Follow Liam on Twitter at Liam Kennedy, at Liam J Kennedy 23. Find out his links on there for the Shields Gazette, and we will be back live next week. Quick prediction for West Ham, Liam.
1-1.
1-1. Yeah. I think we've got enough. Few injuries to them. Our players coming back, buoyed by 4 points. I think a draw is possible there. But great stuff, Liam. Look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, pal.
Cheers, Steve.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're at.